my 6. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid, the most awesomest homesteading channel on the internet that has nothing to do with homesteading. Get my 6 is military terminology for watch my back. Watch behind me as you listen to tonight's October Night's Tale. You never know who or what may or may not show up back there. Perhaps the most interesting times of these videos when I come out here and sit in the woods and tell creepy stories is like the 5 minutes before I start rolling or the 5 minutes after I've stopped. It's like you can hear rustling going around, you can see movement. It's like him, her, it, or they are settling into place to listen to tonight's tale. And tonight, as I was setting up, I heard a clear, distinctive tree knock from just behind me. And to my right, your left. So it'd be up in this area. So be observant. Listen to me, but watch back here. So we're going to read a story tonight from True Hauntings, Volume 1. Personal stories of real experiences with the paranormal, supernatural, cryptids, aliens, and UFOs. This entire series, there's 4 volumes thus far. We're collecting stories for Volume 5. They're all available. There goes a hawk right over me. It's beautiful. On Amazon and print or Kindle. If you have a story that you'd like to have us share with our viewers or in print form or both, send it to us with your permission to do so. The channel's email is crazylake@mail.com. crazylake@mail.com. So tonight's story comes to us from a viewer named Andrea. It's a story called Faces in the Floor. It's one of those stories that kind of highlights a couple things. You never really quite know somebody you think you know. And some of the most wicked people are some of those folks who you would least suspect. Okay? Here we go. Andrea writes, I am so glad you finally got an email address for your channel because I have a story I've wanted to share with you for a long time, but I didn't know how to get in touch with you. Since I was young, I've had an ability to sense and see things that most people cannot, and that is why I am so drawn to you and your channel. Have you ever stared at a wall of paneling or a wooden floor and seen faces? Most people can do this, and when I had the experience that I'm sharing with you here, and that I give you permission to share or use in any way, I thought that was all I was seeing, designs and wood grains on the floor, but I would find out years later that that was not the case. My father had a great aunt who died when I was only 6 years old. I guess we'd go spend a couple of weeks with her in the summer when I was small. She lived alone in an old house in a small town in Virginia. I'm not going to name the town, but it's not far from where you live. It's smack dab in the middle of Richmond and Charlottesville, but trust me, there is very little in between. The beautiful James River flows through the area, but there's not much else to describe the location. I'd venture to say there might be a military institute out there to describe it, or perhaps a juvenile delinquency detention center. I fished that entire river through that area. I guarantee you I have been wherever this story is set. I remember the last summer that we were down seeing Aunt Gladys. I couldn't sleep a wink at night because I kept seeing faces in the floor of the room I was staying in. The room was in an old house that dated back to the 1880s. It was one of the first houses built in the area during the Reconstruction period following the Civil War. I remember each morning waking up and complaining during breakfast that I couldn't sleep because the faces in the floor kept staring at me. I remember even as a child my parents seemed embarrassed and my Aunt Gladys seemed a little nervous. I never really understood the implications of either until just a couple of weeks ago. For you to fully understand the ramifications of the faces in the floor and how this all turned out, there is something you must understand about Aunt Gladys. She'd been married 5 times. Now that's not too uncommon in the days in which we live, but back then, in the late 1970s, God, I'm old, it was. All of Aunt Gladys's husbands were what one might call losers. No one, according to my mother, could understand her taste in men. One of them she'd actually taken in off the streets as a homeless guy. What in the heck a homeless guy was doing wandering around in the very secluded regions of this small rural Virginia location is beyond me, unless he was some sort of fugitive in hiding. As it turns out, that's pretty much what everyone else wrote the guy off as well, as not a year after he married Aunt Gladys, he took off wandering again. At least that's the explanation that Aunt Gladys gave when all of a sudden the man was no longer around. Almost all of the men were drunks. The family all knew that Aunt Gladys had a time with all of them once they started drinking. 3 of the 5 husbands allegedly got drunk and ran off from her. And she claimed each time that she couldn't have been happier because it was better than having to continue to live with them. That marriage lasted 3 years, the one with the homeless guy, which was actually the longest of Aunt Gladys's marriages. And when he took off, everyone was shocked, even though it wasn't the first time it had happened to her. However, the man's 4 grown children were a little more than shocked. They were pissed, even though we could never understand why they hadn't been equally concerned about him when he'd been homeless. Anyway, this man's adult children insisted that a thorough investigation be done on Aunt Gladys. They pointed out to the police that it was a little too ironic that she'd had 5 men run off and leave her. The police found no foul play, though looking back, we do believe that it helped Aunt Gladys's case that she checked herself into a psychiatric hospital where she stayed for 6 months, conveniently, until the end of the investigation. To say that anyone in our family ever suspected Aunt Gladys of anything malicious prior to the disappearance of her 5th husband after the disappearance of the other 4 would be inaccurate, but after the investigation was launched, a lot of people in our family, those old enough to be in the know, began asking questions that they'd never asked before. Aunt Gladys died in 1980, and despite having been married so many times, she never actually had any children. Her house and the 5 acres that it sat on, overseeing a wide turn in the James River down at the bottom of a very steep hill, reverted to my father in the will. He tried renting it out for a few years, but after having renters all but destroy the place, and half the time not even paying the rent, and never on time, he said to hell with it all and let the house sit. My father passed away a few years later, and my brother got the old farmette. It had reverted to my mother after my father's death, but she didn't want it, so she sold it to my brother for $1. My brother was teaching at the time. He's since retired, and he went to the old house during his summer break the first year he got the house. His plan was to fix it up and use it as a fishing cabin since it sat on the James River. However, the house was so far gone, he decided to have it torn down, and he intended to put a camper in its spot instead. When he had the house torn down, aside from the snake dens and ground hornets' nests they found everywhere, they also found in an old root cellar that was right underneath the room I'd tried to sleep in all those years before as a little girl, but could not because of all those faces in the floor staring up at me, 5 skeletal remains of human bodies. All men. Kevin, I hope you're not leaving YouTube because I believe that there are many people like me and you, in my opinion, who have gifts that they have no safe place to go other than your channel to talk about. Like the guy who sent in the story about the hole in the base of a tree in a graveyard that was clearly there one day and then not the next. Please come back to YouTube so we can share our stories of strange occurrences with you so that you can, in turn, share them with others. Again, you have my permission to use this story in any capacity that you choose, be it on your YouTube channel or in one of your books or both. Kindest regards, Andrea. Wow, there you have it, folks. A story of murder and of a woman who has the ability to see what others can't. That's really creepy. That's perfect for an October night as we draw even closer to Halloween. So I hope you enjoyed that story. If you saw anything back there, make sure to timestamp it so others can look as well. If you've got a creepy story, send it in to us. Again, the email address here on the channel is crazylake@mail.com, crazylake@mail.com, and we will see you for more next time.